All right, ready to dive into Unreal Engine's blueprints.
Let's do it.
Yeah, if you're dreaming of making awesome 3D games, but the thought of code makes your head spin,
Yeah,
blueprints might just be your new best friend.
I think so.
They let you build game logic visually, no hardcore coding required.
Exactly.
And our guide for this deep dive is Blueprints Visual Scripting for Unreal Engine by Brendan Sewell.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed reading this book. He walks you through building a whole first-person shooter step by step.
Which is really cool to see all come together.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about making objects react to players.
Right.
Building slick user interfaces.
Yeah.
Even designing some pretty clever AI enemies.
And the book even covers how to publish your game.
Right, the whole process.
Yeah.
But I think we need to start with the basics.
Okay.
What are blueprints, really?
Well, think of blueprints like flowcharts for your game logic.
Oh, okay.
You have these things called nodes, which represent actions or pieces of data,
Okay.
and then you connect them with wires to show how that information flows.
So instead of writing lines of code, I'm basically piecing together these visual blocks.
That's it.
Interesting. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, so imagine you want a simple cylinder in your game,
Okay.
and you want it to turn red when it gets hit by a projectile.
Right.
With blueprints, you would use an event hit node as the trigger for that.
So it's kind of like a virtual tripwire,
Exactly.
something that sets things in motion when it gets tripped.
Uh-huh.
But what if you only want the cylinder to react to the player's projectile?
Right, because what if it bumps into something else?
Yeah, I wouldn't want it changing color every time the wind blows or something.
Exactly. So that's where something called casting comes in.
Casting.
Yeah, it's like using a metal detector to find a specific coin in a pile of junk.
Okay.
In this case, you're making sure the blueprint only reacts if it's hit by your first-person projectile.
First-person projectile.
Yeah, that's what the blueprint for the player's billet is called in the book.
Ah, got it. So it's basically filtering out all those irrelevant collisions.
Exactly.
That's smart.
And the book stresses how important it is to test as you go along.
That makes sense.
You build a bit, you test it out in the engine, you tweak it.
Yeah,
It's all about iteration.
makes sense. Okay, so we've got this cylinder changing color. That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
But what about making the player character do something awesome?
Oh, right.
You know, like how about sprinting?
Oh, yeah. Essential for any good game.
Right. How does the book handle that?
Well, in this case, the book ties the sprint action to an input.
Okay.
In this example is pressing the shift key.
All right, so the player hits shift and then what?
Then the blueprints access the character's movement component
Okay.
and give them a temporary speed boost.
Got it. I'm assuming there's also a stamina system?
Of course, wouldn't want them sprinting forever.
Right. Got to add some limitations, some strategic thinking.
Yeah, you don't want them just sprinting through the whole level.
No, definitely not. So the book uses timers and variables to keep track of all that.
That's right.
It's all about balance, right?
Yep.
Now, what about adding a zoom function?
Like aiming down the sights.
Exactly.
The book covers that too. It maps that to right-clicking the mouse.
Okay.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Ah.
Instead of just an instant FOV change, it uses these things called timelines.
Timelines.
Yeah, to create a smooth animation over a short period of time.
Ah, so it feels more polished, less jarring for the player.
Exactly. It's those little touches that make the game feel good.
I'm sensing a theme here. It's not just about making things work, it's about making them feel good too.
For sure. Attention to detail.
So we've got our player sprinting, zooming, shooting projectiles that turn things red. But what's missing?
Let me guess. A fancy user interface
You read my mind.
to show off all that cool stuff.
How do blueprints help with that?
Oh, they're essential.
Yeah.
Unreal has this tool called UMG, which stands for Unreal Motion Graphics.
Okay.
It's basically your playground for building all those UI elements,
Okay.
like health bars, ammo counters, all that good stuff.
I love a good health bar.
Just like a visual representation of your hopes and dreams hanging in the balance.
That's a great way to put it.
The book shows you how to use horizontal and vertical boxes
Okay.
to arrange all these elements on screen.
Got it.
And then you link visual progress bars to variables in your player character blueprint.
Okay.
So they update dynamically as the player, say, takes damage or uses stamina.
So it's all connected behind the scenes. Pretty neat. What about other stuff like ammo counters and objective markers and stuff?
Those are all just text elements.
Okay.
And they're dynamically updated based on the player's actions.
And this is all driven by blueprints?
Yep, all those beautiful blueprints.
This is starting to sound like a real game.
Yeah, it's coming together.
We've got the player, some basic actions, a fancy UI,
Right.
but something's still bothering me.
What's that?
Well, right now our player can just shoot endlessly.
Oh, yeah.
There are no consequences.
You're thinking like a true game designer.
Got to make things a little more challenging, right?
Exactly.
Limited resources, tough choices.
The book adds ammo limitations.
Ooh, tell me more. How does it do that?
Well, the blueprints prevent shooting when your ammo count reaches 0.
Okay.
Plus, it introduces ammo pickups you'll find scattered around the level.
Ah, so the player has to scavenge for ammo, think strategically.
Exactly.
I like it. What are those pickups? Like, how are those made?
They're actually their own separate actor blueprints,
Okay.
and they use collision triggers to reload the player's ammo.
It's all starting to click now, all these pieces fitting together.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how it all works together.
Now, what about a real objective?
Right.
What's the point of all this shooting if there's no goal?
Well, the book sets up a system to track enemy kills. And when you hit a certain number, that triggers the win condition.
Ah, a win condition.
The book even builds a win menu.
Using those widgets again.
That's right, with options to restart or quit, the whole shebang.
We've come a long way. We've got basic interactions, player abilities, UI elements, ammo limits, and even a win condition.
It's pretty amazing what you can do.
All built without writing any traditional code. I am impressed.
And this is just the beginning.
Wait, hold on, there's more?
Oh, yeah. Now imagine taking this a step further and adding AI enemies into the mix.
Wait, AI enemies? Those seem way too complex for a visual scripting system like Blueprints.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, you've got my attention. How do you even begin to create AI using Blueprints?
Well, the book actually switches things up at this point.
Okay.
It goes from those static cylinders
Right.
to full-on animated enemy characters.
Oh, wow, that's a big jump.
It is, and it uses this free marketplace asset.
Oh, I like free.
Yeah, it's called the Animation Starter Pack.
Oh.
To get you up and running with some cool animations.
So we're not just dealing with basic shapes anymore. We got actual characters running around.
Yeah, exactly.
But how does the book handle the AI behavior?
Well, it introduces you to AI controllers
Okay.
and something called behavior trees.
Behavior trees?
Yeah, they're visual tools
Okay,
within Unreal Engine
got it.
for defining how your AI makes decisions.
So instead of writing lines of code to tell the AI what to do,
Right.
I'm essentially visually mapping out how it's going to react to different situations.
That's it.
That's pretty cool.
Imagine it like you're creating one of those choose-your-own-adventure books.
Oh, I loved those as a kid.
You're laying out the different paths and branches based on various conditions.
So with behavior trees, I can basically say, if this happens, then the AI does that.
Exactly.
I'm starting to get the picture.
The book starts by setting up a basic patrol behavior for the enemies.
So they're just kind of wandering around the level?
Yeah. You place these patrol point actors in your level,
Okay.
and the behavior tree uses move toe and wait tasks
Okay.
to make the enemy loop between those points.
So it's like a security guard making their rounds.
Exactly.
But how do we make them aware of the player?
For that we use the pawn sensing component.
Pawn sensing, what's that?
It allows enemies to detect the player
Okay.
through sight or R sound.
Oh, so now they can see and hear us. That adds a whole new level of challenge.
Exactly. But how do they decide to attack?
Yeah, that's a good question. How do I program that kind of decision making?
The attack behavior is triggered when the enemy gets close enough to the player.
Okay.
It calculates the distance between them using vectors.
Vectors, those little guys are popping up everywhere.
Yeah, they're pretty important in game development.
I'm starting to realize that.
But don't worry, it's actually pretty intuitive within Blueprints.
Okay, that's good to know. So the enemy gets close enough, it decides to attack.
Mm-hmm.
What happens then? How does that actually play out in the game?
For that, you create a custom blueprint task.
A custom task?
Yeah.
So I can create my own actions and behaviors, not just use the pre-built ones.
That's right. You can get really creative with it.
Okay, that opens up a lot of possibilities.
This task applies damage to the player when the enemy attacks.
Got it. So it connects to the health system we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
This is amazing. I didn't realize blueprints were so versatile.
They're pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop there.
Oh, no.
You can even make your AI investigate sounds.
Whoa, hold on. How does that work?
Okay, so you give your AI something called blackboard variables.
Blackboard variables.
It's basically like a little notepad where it can jot down information.
Okay.
In this case, if it heard a sound and the location of that sound.
So it's like the AI is taking notes.
Exactly. And then, using its behavior tree, It can decide whether to interrupt its patrol and go check it out or not.
So I'm giving my AI the ability to make decisions
Right.
based on what's happening in the game world.
You're basically breathing life into these virtual beings.
This is starting to feel like a real dynamic game.
It is, right.
But we're not quite done yet, are we?
Nope, there's still more.
Okay, hit me.
The book shows you how to add a lose screen.
Of course, gotta have a lose screen.
A round system
Okay,
to track your progress.
I like it.
And even a classic pause menu.
All right, let's break those down one by one.
Sure.
The round system, how does that work?
Well, it uses something called save game objects.
Save game object.
They're like containers to store the player's progress.
Okay,
Specifically, the round number.
got it.
When the game starts, it loads the save and adjusts the difficulty based on how far the player has gotten.
So it remembers where you left off
Yeah,
and ramps up the challenge as you progress.
exactly. Keeps things interesting.
That's a really cool feature.
Uh-huh.
And what about the pause menu? Is that pretty standard stuff?
Yeah, hit the ESC key.
Yeah.
Options to resume, reset, save data, or quit.
All the essentials.
All built using those widgets we talked about before.
Widgets. Always coming back to widgets.
Yeah.
So we've gone from basic interactions to a full-fledged first-person shooter.
It is pretty cool.
And we haven't written a single line of code.
Nope. All visual scripting with blueprints.
This is amazing.
And the best part is,
There's a best part.
this book barely scratches the surface.
There's even more we can do with blueprints.
Oh, yeah. The book goes into a lot more detail on these topics.
My mind is blown.
And it even covers developing for mobile and consoles.
This is a lot to take in, but in a good way. I feel like the possibilities are endless with blueprints.
They really are. That's the beauty of this visual scripting system.
It seems so much more accessible than traditional coding.
Exactly. You don't need years of coding experience to bring your ideas to life.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. It's really shifted my perspective on what's possible with blueprints. But the book doesn't just throw you into the deep end and leave you to fend for yourself, right?
No, not at all. It actually emphasizes this really important concept,
Yeah.
the iterative nature of game development.
Right, right. It's not about getting everything perfect on the first try.
Exactly. It's all about that cycle. Build, test, refine, and repeat.
And blueprints make that whole process so much smoother, don't they?
Absolutely.
You can quickly prototype something, get it into the game, see how it feels, and then iterate without having to mess around with tons of code.
Exactly.
And speaking of code,
Yeah.
I think it's worth emphasizing just how much you can achieve with blueprints without ever having to write traditional code.
Absolutely.
I feel like a lot of people underestimate the power and flexibility of visual scripting.
Yeah.
They might think it's only for beginners or for simple tasks.
That's a common misconception.
Right.
While blueprints are incredibly approachable for newcomers, they're also robust enough to handle some really complex gameplay systems, intricate AI behaviors, even network communication.
So hypothetically, could you build an entire AAA game using just blueprints?
Theoretically, yes. Although in practice, most large-scale games use a combination of blueprints and traditional code.
Right, different tools for different jobs.
Exactly. Blueprints excel at visual scripting,
Okay.
prototyping, and handling gameplay logic.
Got it.
But for those really performance-critical tasks
Right.
or low-level engine interactions, traditional code might be a better choice.
It's about finding the right balance,
Yeah.
leveraging the strengths of each approach.
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious about the limitations of blueprints.
Okay.
Are there any hard limits to what this visual scripting system can achieve?
Well, there are certain tasks that might be more challenging
Okay.
or less efficient to implement with blueprints
Right.
compared to traditional code.
Sure.
Like, for instance, if you're dealing with really complex algorithms or
Okay.
low-level memory management,
Yeah.
code might be the way to go.
That makes sense.
Every system has its trade-offs.
Right.
But here's the exciting part.
Yeah.
Blueprints are constantly evolving.
That's great.
Unreal Engine is always adding new features, new functionality,
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
So it's not a static thing.
Right.
It's actually a living, breathing system that's constantly growing and adapting
Exactly.
alongside the needs of game developers.
And that's one of the most exciting things about working with Unreal Engine and blueprints. You're constantly learning, discovering new possibilities,
Yeah.
stretching your creative muscles.
I love that. It's like a never-ending adventure in the world of game development.
It really is.
And the book doesn't just focus on the technical side of blueprints.
Right.
It also encourages you to develop your game design skills
Yeah.
to craft those compelling worlds and experiences that players will love.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, technology is just a tool.
Right.
It's the human creativity, the storytelling, the artistry that really brings a game to life.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And Brendan Sewell's book really does a fantastic job of guiding you through that entire process,
Mm-hmm.
from those initial sparks of inspiration
Yeah.
all the way to that final polished product.
It's been a pleasure diving into this book with you today.
Likewise. And for our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has sparked your own game dev dreams
I hope so.
and given you a glimpse into the power and the accessibility of Unreal Engine's blueprints. Remember, no matter your experience level, you have the potential to create amazing things.
Absolutely.
The only limit is your imagination. So go out there, experiment, create, and have fun.
That's what it's all about.
The world of game development is waiting for you.
And there's no better time to start than now.
Now, one area where the book really pushes the boundaries is in its exploration of different input methods.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
It's not just about keyboard and mouse anymore.
No, not at all.
Especially if you're thinking about consoles or just want to give your players more options.
Yeah.
You need to consider how your game's going to handle gamepad input.
I bet that gets pretty complex, mapping all those buttons and analog sticks to actions within the game.
It can,
Right.
but the book breaks it down really well.
Okay, good.
It explains how to access those gamepad inputs within blueprints
Okay.
and then use them to trigger events or change the player's behavior.
So, for example, I could have the left stick controlling movement,
Right.
the right stick handling the camera, and the triggers taking care of shooting.
Exactly. All mapped out visually in those blueprints.
That's awesome.
And the book really emphasizes how important it is to create a smooth and intuitive control scheme,
Right.
no matter what input device the player is using.
Yeah, you don't want people fighting with the controls.
Nobody wants clunky controls.
It can ruin the whole experience.
Exactly. But it's not just about making the game feel good to play.
Right.
It's also about making it look good.
And the book talks about that too.
It does.
Okay, tell me more.
It dives into the challenges of handling different screen resolutions
Right, because not every screen is the same.
and aspect ratios.
Yeah, you don't want your game looking all stretched out or weird.
Exactly.
Uh,
On different displays.
and it provides some really clever techniques for making your UI and gameplay elements adapt to those different screen configurations.
So it's all about those little details
Yeah.
that contribute to a polished feel.
Exactly.
Speaking of polish, the book also covers some cool tricks for enhancing the visual feedback in your game.
Ooh, visual feedback is so important.
I love that stuff. It really adds a layer of immersion,
Right.
makes the game world come alive.
It's like adding those extra little details
Yeah.
that make it feel so much more real.
So what kind of tricks are we talking about here?
Well, for example, when the player sprints, you can make the camera shake slightly
Oh, yeah.
to give a sense of speed and intensity.
I love those subtle touches.
It makes a big difference. Or when the player takes damage, you can create a red vignette effect that flashes on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
It's like this visceral cue that something bad just happened.
It's almost like those visual cues are speaking to the player's primal instincts. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it even covers how to create those awesome particle effects.
Particle effects like explosions and stuff.
Exactly. Using Unreal Engine's cascade system.
So I could have explosions, smoke trails, magic spells.
Anything you can imagine.
It's like having a mini Hollywood special effects studio at my fingertips.
That's a great way to put it.
I can already picture all the cool visual flourishes I could add to my game.
And those visual effects aren't just for eye candy.
Right.
They can also communicate information to the player.
Okay, how so?
Well, you can use them to highlight interactive objects,
Right.
indicate enemy weak points, or even show the trajectory of projectiles.
So it's like adding a visual language to the game, another layer of depth to the experience.
Exactly. Now, one of the things I really appreciate about the book's approach
Yeah.
is that it focuses on starting with the basics
Okay.
and then gradually building up to more complex concepts.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly.
You can't expect to master a musical instrument overnight.
It takes time and practice.
And it's the same with game development, right?
It's a journey, not a destination.
The book reminds us that it's all about embracing that journey.
Of learning, exploring, and pushing your creativity.
I love that. You've shared so much incredible information about blueprints and game development. I feel so inspired to start creating.
That's fantastic.
And I know our listeners are feeling the same way.
And remember, there's a whole world of resources and support out there to help you along the way.
Yeah, the Unreal Engine community is incredibly welcoming and always eager to help newcomers.
It's a great community.
It's like having a team of experienced adventurers
Right.
guiding you through uncharted territory.
Exactly. So are you ready for the final part of our deep dive?
Bring it on!
All right, let's wrap things up and see what other gems we can unearth.
You know, one thing that's really stuck with me throughout this deep dive is how much the book emphasizes the iterative nature of game development.
Oh, for sure. It's not about getting everything perfect on the first try.
Right, it's about embracing that build, test, refine, repeat cycle.
Exactly. And blueprints make that process so much smoother.
You can quickly prototype an idea, play test it, see what works, what doesn't, and then iterate without getting bogged down in code.
And speaking of code, you might be surprised just how much you can do with blueprints without ever writing a single line of traditional code.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception out there that blueprints are only for simple tasks or for beginners.
I've heard that too, but it's not really true.
Right.
Blueprints are definitely approachable for newcomers,
Sure.
but they're also powerful enough to build really complex gameplay systems, AI behaviors, even network communication.
So, hypothetically, you could build an entire AAA quality game using only blueprints.
Hypothetically, yes.
Wow.
In reality, though, most big games use a combination of blueprints and traditional code.
Right, like different tools for different tasks.
Exactly. Blueprints are great for visual scripting, prototyping, handling game logic.
Makes
But for really performance-heavy tasks or low-level engine stuff, traditional code might be the better option.
So it's all about finding the right balance, using the strengths of each approach.
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious about the limitations of blueprints.
Okay.
Are there any hard limits to what they can do?
Well, some things might be a bit trickier or less efficient to do with blueprints compared to code.
Sure.
Like if you're working with really complex algorithms or low-level memory management,
Okay.
code might be the way to go.
Right, that makes sense.
Every system has its trade-offs.
But the exciting thing is,
What's that?
blueprints are always evolving.
That's right. Unreal is always adding new features, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
So it's not a static thing.
Yep.
It's a living, breathing system
Exactly.
that's always growing and adapting along with the needs of game developers.
And that's one of the most exciting things about working with Unreal and blueprints.
I can imagine.
You're always learning, discovering new things, stretching your creativity.
It's a never-ending adventure.
It really is. And the book doesn't just focus on the technical side.
Right.
It encourages you to think like a game designer, to build compelling worlds and understand what makes a game fun.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, technology is just a tool.
It's the human element, the creativity, the storytelling that truly brings a game to life.
Well said. And Brendan Sewell's book does a fantastic job of guiding you through that whole process,
It does.
from the initial spark of an idea to the final polished product.
It's been a pleasure diving into this book with you and sharing these insights with our listener.
The pleasure was all mine. And for everyone listening out there, we hope this deep dive has ignited your own game dev dreams and shown you just how powerful and accessible blueprints can be.
Absolutely. No matter your skill level.
You have the potential to create incredible things.
The only limit is your imagination.
So go out there, experiment, create, have fun.
The world of game development is waiting for you.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into blueprints. Until next time, keep those creative sparks flying.